Hosting for the Dice Tower is generously provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff, in stock at coolstuffinc.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 478.
Pandemic Legacy!
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Scott tests the atmosphere. Brian does not want the bean, and Mark just wants to hit something with a foam sword. Plus, Tom wonders if it's okay to cheat in order to catch a cheater. We talk about our favorite D6 designs, and we finish the show with a spoiler-filled discussion of Pandemic Legacy. Don't worry, we'll warn you. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the medic to my quarantine specialist, Tom Vassell.
Well, thank you for giving me the very best role.
Yeah, it's my wife's favorite for sure.
Now, here's the deal, folks. Today, you might possibly be listening to a very short episode of the Dice Tower.
You might.
And that is, if you have not played Pandemic Legacy yet, then don't listen to the end of our show. Now, what we're going to do... And we will do this occasionally with games, is we're going to talk about Pandemic Legacy and go in depth about it a bit and spoil it. But we're going to do that after the end credits.
Yeah, so you still get to hear the pun.
Right, and Eric will put in some sort of obvious warning sounds that say, don't listen past this point. So we're not going to spoil it now. Don't worry, you can still listen to the whole episode. But when you start hearing that Dice Tower music, you can turn it off. However, if you have played Pandemic Legacy and are dying to hear someone else talk about it, like I'm always doing, then this episode is for you. Currently, Eric and I are both on airplanes, I believe. Or we're in Essen, I'm not sure.
It all depends on the time zone.
Let's see.
And when you listen to this. I mean, we might be home and, at BGG Con by now by the time you hear this.
That's true. Don't ruin it, Eric, okay? Okay, so anyway, we're going to Essen Spiel this week, so you might be listening to this on your way. You might be driving through Italy or France or in the Channel right now listening to this. We don't know. But if you do come to Essen, please stop by our booth. It is in Hall 6, B125. We will always be there. You can find us for sure the first hour of each day and the last hour of each day. So if you're... Now, I have a lot of meetings, so I will be running all over the place. If you see me, say hi. And Eric, Sam, and Z will also be at the booth during various times. And I will stop by there during the day often. I just... there's a lot more meetings I have to go to than I used to. Who invented meetings?
Who invented meetings?
Who invented meetings? I'd like to shake their hand, and then I wring it right off their bodies. Okay, I don't know why I went off on that rant.
I don't know. We
might have some promos. We will definitely have tickets to our live show, which is at 5 o'clock on Friday. So come by Friday morning to get those. If you ask for them on Thursday, I'm going to say no. If you ask for an exception on Thursday, I'm going to say no. Because I know...
We will laugh derisively.
So we're allowed to do that now. We've warned everybody. So
For you, never.
I might be kinder than that.
Oh, all right.
So anyhow, wow, see so much going on. And so, but you know what? This show is about games, and that's why we're here. I'm Tom Vassell, in case I didn't say that already.
Oh, hi, I'm Eric Summerer.
And we're going to talk about a couple games. The big game of the episode is Pandemic Legacy. But let's start off with a very, very small game.
Yes. Well, we had the opportunity to get together and play some games in Connecticut as a group. And Z taught me Onirim.
I think he's like an evangelist for this game.
He really is. This is one that he wants to show to everyone.
Hey, sir, have you ever played a game called Onirim? It could change your life. Here, let's sit down. This will only take 10 minutes.
Which is tricky because it's a 1 or 2 player game, so he has to teach one person at a time. That's going to take a while.
That's the motto, but one person at a time. I believe it's
yes.
I believe it's in the logo.
Anyway, so this is either a solitaire game or a partnership 2-player game, and you are trying to open a certain number of dream doors. It's 8 dream doors. And you do this by collecting sets of like-colored cards. And you have to play these one at a time. You play a card and draw a card, basically. And you have to play them with alternating symbols. There's 3 different symbols. There's some wild cards in there as well. And you can't play symbols that are identical next to each other. So you have to sort of plan your hand so that you can get, say, 3 green cards together, but they alternate symbols so that no 2 identical symbols are next to each other. And even when you're done there, those cards don't go away, so you have to start the next sequence with a differing symbol as well. If you're playing the partnership game, there's a couple of cards in the center that both players can use, and there are mechanisms to swap those. Communication is pretty open. You can say, what do you have? It's like, well, I got a green key. I really need a green, I forget what the symbols are now, but a not key to be able to play, and trying to help each other out through that mechanism. But there's also bad cards in the deck, and when those come up, you have to either discard one of those keys, which are very valuable and useful, or you have to wipe your hand out. But as the more cards you let go and sacrifice to those bad cards, the worse things are going to get for you, and the more you're going to run out of cards. If you run out of cards in the deck, you've lost, and you have to somehow manage to unlock all 8 of these cards. It's very straightforward, but I think novel and unique enough to be stand out a lot. There's also a whole bunch of expansions, like mini modules in the box that add some new cards and some more wild cards and cool stuff. I played one of those modules and did enjoy this a good bit. I think if it only played more people, I think I'd be a little more interested. I don't know if I'm running out to purchase this because I would have to play it solo or 2-player. If it played 3 or 4, I'd be a little happier with it. But I did really enjoy it, and I can see why Z is so excited about it. It's a good time. That's Onirim from Z-Man Games, I believe.
All right, well, another convert. All right, well, let me unconvert you guys to a game where I loved the very first version. Age of Empires 3, the board game from Eagle Games, put Glenn Drover on the map. It was a great worker placement game. They changed the name to Empire Age of Discovery because they lost the license, and it didn't matter because it wasn't anything like the computer game anyway. A great worker placement game. Really enjoyed it. And then they put it in space. Empire's Galactic Rebellion. And I liked the idea. And I opened the box, and wow, there's a lot of pieces in this box. And that's good because it costs like $150. So there's tons of miniatures and factions, and you're on these different planets, and worker placement, and there's different types of workers, so different workers will do different things. They ironed out a few of the faults of Empire's Age of Discovery, and so for the most part, the game runs much more smoothly, and I dislike it.
Oh.
You were not expecting that conclusion.
I know, you were leading me down a totally different path.
You're right. Well, here's the problem. The game has 3 problems. 2 of them are minor. The minor problems are the graphic design looks like they hired me to do it. And the game itself, you need a gigantic table to put everything on it. They're like, place these cards next to the board. Like, yeah, whatever. I'm making a pile over here in the corner because that's all the space we have for them. Those are minor things. The major problem is the combat in this game. See, in the original Empire Age of Discoveries, if you fight someone, I would have one of my guys shoot one of yours, and it was kind of like a very streamlined, area control. One of my guys takes out one of your guys, now I have one more guy than you do. Ha ha. Well, they decided to, make this a combat game. So each player starts with 3 science cubes, and anytime you fight someone, you throw your science cubes into the bag, and your opponent's science cubes in the bag, and then you pull 3 of them out. Whoever has more wins the combat. And you can increase or decrease your science cubes over the course of the game. All right. I don't really like it that much, but it's okay. At the end of the game, there's these big black stormtrooper, they look like they're wearing Darth Vader armor almost, and so they're all over the planets, and they like change different variables for things you're doing over the course of the game. But at the end of the game, before you score the final round, they decide to, like, take out the rebellions. Because if you haven't figured this out, you're running a Galactic Rebellion in this game, as is everybody else. So if you're playing a 6-player game, apparently there's 6 different Galactic Rebellions going on. You think you guys would work together a little bit, but whatever. So these guys decide to put these rebellions down. So you have to, each of these guys will fight. So let's say there's a planet, and there's 3 of these guys on the planet, 3 of these big stormtrooper type guys. And Eric has 6 yellow on the planet, I have 4 red, and Bob has 3 blue, Susan has 2 yellow, and Sally has a pink on the planet, whatever. So these are all these troops on the planet. So these troops will attack Eric's guys first. Why? Because he has the most. And they will attack him until they've killed all of them. If they kill all Eric's guys, then they kill the second most, which is me, and so on and so forth. Or if we kill them. These guys use 8 cubes, which is a lot. Hopefully over the course of the game, you've increased your cubes somewhat. So we throw 8 black cubes in the bag. Eric has 5 red cubes. We throw 5 red cubes. We pull them out. Black wins. Eric loses 2 guys because these guys are really good at killing. And we pull them out. Eric kills one of these guys. Amazing. We pull them out. They kill one of Eric's. We pull out the cubes. They kill one of Eric's. Then we pull out the cubes. They kill one of Eric's. Okay, fine. They've killed all Eric's. So now we take Eric's cubes out of the bag and we put my cubes into the bag. And we do the same thing until we've killed all these guys or until they've killed all of us. That's one planet. There's 9 on the board.
Oh,
I think there's more than 9, actually. There might be 12. Do you know how long this takes and how tedious this is? To continually put cubes into a bag and then pull them back out again? This sounds like one of the tasks that they set Hercules. You will put cubes into the bag, and then you will pull them out again. How long must I do this?
For all time.
Until the demon is defeated. And so at the end of the game, there's like this wiping out of people all over the board. And you will beat these guys eventually, although in our games, a few of the planets were totally wiped out, all the rebellions.
Oh.
And then you score. And here's the deal. It's not even that big of a deal because you score 3 times over the course of the game. The points are the same each time on each of these planets. So it's just the third scoring is all messed up. Wow. I cannot tell you how much I was sitting here like, yeah, this game's not so bad. Yes, it is. Wow. I cannot recommend it because here's the deal. The game costs $150.
Wow.
It better be amazing. It's not. Sorry. Empire's Galactic Rebellion. Pass.
It's a shame. I have not a game to talk about. This is a containment unit for a game from the Broken Token. Now, usually, Broken Token's known for inserts. They make stuff that fits together. You assemble the darn thing, and then it goes inside the existing box and organizes the components inside. But this is called the Biohazard Containment Unit. It's meant to hold Pandemic. And it is its own crate. It's actually a box. And I've complained in the past that now that Pandemic has 3 expansions to the base set, it no longer fits in the box. In fact, I loved the box for In the Lab because it fit everything. And then they came out with another expansion that no longer fits in the box. However, this solves that problem. The Biohazard Containment Unit has all these slots and trays that all assemble and come apart, and it holds everything for the base game and its 3 expansions. It does it all. And it's pretty nice. You put it together, it looks pretty. It's got a nice little biohazard symbol on it. It's got a cool tray that holds all of the pawns that has like a sliding plexi cover over it, and you turn it over, and that can't spill. But don't get too excited about the fact that the pawns can't spill, because everything else can spill. If you turn the whole thing over, like on its side or upside down, all those little green vaccine things, well, they'll just get everywhere. It's really a mess. I do actually plan on releasing a video review of this. I've taken all of the pretty shots. I just haven't put it all together yet. Maybe by the time we go to Essen, I'll have this sent to you, Tom. Maybe. Anyway, as long as you keep it flat, this is an excellent unit. And even if you have, say, the meeple source meeples for Pandemic, or the Litco disease thingies, They will fit in the Petri dishes or the meeples, the extra meeples. They don't fit in that cool tray thing, but there's enough extra space in this crate that you could stick them in a baggie and it would be fine. There's nice slots for all the cards, adjustable slots for the cards. You can organize it however you want. Really a solid piece of work. It took about an hour to assemble, so that's a solid piece of work too. It takes some glue too for a couple of those loose connections, but otherwise a really nice piece of work. And it does what it says it does. It holds Pandemic and its expansions, and I don't have to carry around a couple of rubber-banded boxes anymore. So, big thumbs up from me, the Biohazard Containment Unit from Broken Token.
That's my biggest problem with Broken Token. They actually just sent me an email and said, what new stuff would you like to review? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to put it together. I'll have Melody put it together.
It is, I mean, I was a little worried because it's solid, especially the outer thing of this unit, but the inner ones, they're solid, but just a little more brittle than I would like when I'm putting it together. I felt like I was a little afraid it was going to snap a couple of things as I'm trying to fit these joints together and punch them out of the sprues and everything. I didn't break anything, but I was a little worried about it.
All right. Well, quick last game to talk about, and that is the Castles of Burgundy card game.
Oh.
Now, I'm not a huge Stefan Feld fan, but I do like Castles of Burgundy, as does everybody. I think so. It seems like that's his highest rated game.
Everyone does.
Do you like it?
I do. I like it.
Well, there you go. It's kind of a blah game, looking-wise anyway. You're using dice to get tiles, and then you're using those dice to put those tiles on your board. And then the way you put these tiles on the board will score you different points. So this card game streamlines this concept, although it doesn't really change it that much. There's a bunch of cards, and you're going to have these cards out in the middle, and you put them next to little dice, and then you get 6 cards. And you'll flip over 2 of them, and they show 2 dice at the top of the cards. They're the same cards that you're buying, but you only look at the dice. And then you can use these cards to get a card from the middle of the table and stick it in front of in your projects area. And then you can also use a card to move a card from your projects area in front of you. And moving cards in front of you can do different things. They can get you livestock. They can let you sell goods. They can give you special abilities. But if you get 3 cards of the same color, then they score at the end of the game. Each card is worth a certain number of victory points, like 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, whatever. So you definitely want to get 3 of the same color. Well, that's easier said than done. Also, the first person to get 3 of a color gets bonus points. And there's a few other ways to get bonus points, but the game is so streamlined and so quick. We're talking 30 minutes, I think, max. And it doesn't feel that different than Castles of Burgundy. I like it. No more Castles of Burgundy board game for me. Card game only.
Okay.
And it plays really well as a 2-player game. It's simple and easy. You know, you're looking at your opponent's dice to see what they might be grabbing from the middle of the table. But for the most part, you're just trying to get these cards in front of you, be the first to get these groups of 3. So if I get 3 green cards, I get some points. I'm like, can I get 3 more green cards? I get 2 of them. That's not good enough. You need to get them in sets of 3. I don't know. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm surprised it has not gotten more buzz in America. No one's brought this one over yet. I highly recommend it. That's the Castles of Burgundy card game.
Who publishes the English version?
There's no American version that I know of. The English version is Ravensburger.
Okay.
They had a booth at Gen Con, if you remember.
Yes.
And they had a copy of the game.
A copy?
Which, it's in my hand. Eric. But I knew you didn't like Feld games, so I didn't want to...
Wait.
I didn't want you to be upset.
Okay.
You're the Lang guy. I'm the Feld guy.
Wait, no.
It all depends what game is there at any particular point in time. Oh, that's not Eric's game. That's my game. No, Eric does those games. Most companies just think you don't like their games.
Oh, great. Yes.
After I write
Thank you.
emails.
This is why all these meetings are private between you and these publishers. I get it. Oh no, you don't want to let Eric play that game. No.
Oh, never mind. That's very generous of you. I will actually schedule some of these meetings for you now.
Okay, wait. Forget I said anything. No, I'm good. No, I'm manning the booth.
It's a nightmare, these meetings. Speaking of which...
Every game has a story, and this is one of them. Presenting Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
This time I want to talk about a horror game with an innovative twist, the VCR game Nightmare. Australians Philip Tanner and Brett Clemens were known as A Couple of Cowboys. Their video production company specialized in television programs, commercials, and corporate work. But Clemens always had a keen interest in board games and had already designed 2 trivia games, but he dreamed of making a horror game. Clements says, "I like the idea of people interacting and getting the heck scared out of them with a loud noise, like a car backfiring." Inspired, Clemens created a box top and a board for his game, but the prototype sat for several months while he thought more about the concept. Tanner remembers when Clements called him excitedly to tell him about a game hosted by a ghoul who interrupts the gameplay. This game was called Nightmare. Nightmare is a board game controlled by a videotape. The player has 60 minutes to collect 6 keys and reach the center of the board, or else they lose to the game's host, the Gatekeeper. The Gatekeeper, who was played by Russian actor Wenity Nosal, startles players with insults and commands as he slowly turns into a green-eyed ghoul. Clement says, as much as the horror concept was meant to deliver shocks, Nightmare was designed to be as silly as it was scary. When A Couple of Cowboys pitched the game to entertainment company Village Roadshow, it was signed within 24 hours. Nightmare was released in 1991 with a cover designed by Daniel Burns. The game was released in Europe in 1995, but due to legal constraints it was retitled Atmosphere: The Harbingers. Nightmare was a huge hit, especially in its native Australia, where it sold 3 million copies. Soda company Pepsi sponsored Nightmare-themed dance parties, and A Couple of Cowboys created a special music video for the event. The game's popularity spawned several sequels. Nightmare 2 was released in 1991 and featured the zombie Baron Samedi. 1993's Nightmare 3 was hosted by the French witch Anne de Chantraine. Nightmare 4 featured Elizabeth Bathory, who transformed into a vampire bat. Atmosphere: The Soul Rangers was released in 1996, pitting the players against a twisted dentist. Atmosphere: The Third Dimension, a PC remake of the first game, was released in 1995. A Nintendo video game was planned, but not released because A Couple of Cowboys felt it was too violent. And a role-playing game was also designed, but was never released. As VCR's popularity declined, it seemed like Nightmare was headed for the graveyard. However, DVDs breathed new life into the franchise. 2004's Atmosphere: The Gatekeeper featured a brand new Gatekeeper and 3D graphics. And a second DVD, Atmosphere: Nufu the Mummy, had a limited release in 2006. Nightmare went on to inspire dozens of VHS-powered board games that ranged from the playable to the downright terrible. 2 standouts are Star Trek: The Next Generation interactive VCR board game, A Klingon's Challenge, which was shot on the actual set of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and Parker Brothers' Star Wars interactive board game, which featured James Earl Jones as Darth Vader, the first time the actor had voiced the character in 13 years since the original trilogy. In 1992, A Couple of Cowboys tried to repeat their success with the Rap Rat video board game. The sensational, recreational, inspirational, educational game featured an unintentionally terrifying rat puppet. Talk about nightmare fuel. Nightmare is frighteningly fun and a fascinating intersection of technology and board gaming. It has clearly inspired recent app-based games like XCOM the board game and the One Night Ultimate series. Tanner says the evolution of Nightmare is not yet finished, so we can only assume it's just a matter of time before we all start having nightmares again.
Until next time, this has been Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
Here he comes, here's Mark Zielinski, he's got his own theme song.
Mark Zielinski, everyone. Hey, everyone, it's Mark. I'm staying here with Mike Williams from Foam Forge. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Hey, I had to stop by your booth. Here at Origins, one of the big things is the arena, and the battle arena. The kids get to fight, even the adults, too, with the boffer weapons and everything, and have a good time. And you've got these more realistic weapons. I thought I'd just stop by and, get some information for you,
Yeah, we're here selling swords, and we also, like you said, we run the fighting arena. It gives people a chance to get up and do something active, see if they can actually do what their character can do, swing a sword at their friends, learn something from one of us. We sell a lot of weapons, either in the heavy contact boffer weapons or the really fancy looking LARP weapons, all handmade here in the USA.
There you go. So if they want to relive Arcadia Quest, they can do it in the arena, right?
Yeah, get a sword and try to see what they can do.
There you go. Now, the boffer weapons, they're made with what kind of foam on the inside?
They're padded with a high-density, like a polyethylene. It's basically what you use in tumbling mats for gymnastics. If it can protect you from falling to the ground, it can protect you from getting hit by a sword.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And then those are covered up with like a cloth, and then those are the ones people really whack each other with.
Yeah, we do a cloth cover on like the big heavy weapons. We also sell those ones for martial arts too, so they use them in a lot of dojos. Or we do the nice rubber coating and finish on the ones that we want to look more realistic.
Right, so let's segue into that. Now, those are not for heavy contact.
No, those are for like a medium contact game where you tap fight. You make sure you hit the person, and there's a lot of skill involved, but you don't really go out there and crush the other person.
Okay, so you're not putting in the high power speed moves. It's more like fencing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
There you go. So now each of these are custom handmade, right?
Yeah, all made here by us and our team.
Right, and then they're covered in what kind of rubber?
That's a synthetic rubber. It's kind of like Plastidip. That's kind of the homemade version.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. So, and I see they come in different colors. I imagine that's for the magic weapons?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And then I also saw that you've got, giant sledgehammers and Space Marine type weapons. So you're branching out from more than just the medieval stuff.
Well, when the LARP zombies attack, you need a LARP sledgehammer to fight them off with.
There you go. So people are, so what are LARP zombies? So they're reliving Zombicide or doing something similar to that?
There's games that run around and you'll use Nerf guns and weapons like we make, and you'll fight off zombies or fight off the neighboring village just trying to steal your supplies.
That's pretty cool. So that's awesome. So do you get involved with these organizations? Do you sponsor them?
Yeah, we sponsor a lot of them. All of us are fighters in at least one game, if not more. So it's a lot of fun. We get to do what we love.
There you go. And they're also cool for the kids to pick up and goof around with at home. I know I've got more than one throwing dagger in my house. And, those are safe for the kids. They don't have anything stiff on the inside. They're just
we make all the throwing weapons
foam.
that are just foam with the rubber on them, and you can chuck them, run around, have fun, hide a couple in your boots.
There you go. Yeah, I mean they fly pretty good too. It's not too bad. So, but they're good for the kids. So if you're interested in that, you can come by here, and they're not that expensive, and they can pick up something at Origins or any of the other conventions that you go to. So I assume you're going to be at Gen Con.
We will.
That's awesome. So where can people get more information? What's the website?
ForgeFoam.com.
ForgeFoam.com, and then also Facebook, I would assume?
Yep, we're on Facebook, just Forge Foam.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk to me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care.
Eric, did you ever play Nightmare?
I've never played Nightmare, no.
I haven't either. And I have to say, I still don't want to. I mean, mostly because it's VHS, right? But mostly because I really like I know someone's going to email me and say, you gotta play it. And there's an app for it. I don't care.
You can watch the videos on YouTube. It's also Atmosphere, I guess, is the one that,
Yeah, every time we say that. But sometimes I just don't want to go into the past and do these things. I remember one time I played a video game. I think it was Clue, maybe? I forget what it was. And I was just, even as a kid, I was like, this is hokey. So, all right. Let's go on to something less hokey.
Hello, I'm Skip Hampton, with yet another tale of betrayal. One of my wife's relatives is married to a board game enthusiast. This I discovered a couple of years ago. We hit it off instantly. We played some party games with the whole family. Gamer-style party games, such as Codenames and One Night Ultimate Werewolf. So far, we have visited them several times, as they live quite a distance away, and each time I look forward to it. Her husband, let's call him John, is a near-perfect gaming partner. He takes the games seriously, but is never a sore winner or loser, placing fun above all. He has good taste in games, loves to discuss strategy during and after the game, and is laid back and fun. When we have played games with John and his wife, let's call her Nancy, we are always joined by her parents, whom I like very much. I would very much enjoy all of their company, even if we weren't delving into the hobby I'm so passionate about. Although I like Nancy, she has a tendency to cheat at games. She will do things like open her eyes during the beginnings of Werewolf to see who the wolves are, or most recently tap the foot of a teammate when they are considering a card during codenames to let them know they are pointing to their team's word. While I don't like this sort of thing in games or in life, she usually spills the beans afterwards, and we all have a laugh. Because it is fairly infrequent, a party game, and everyone is just having a good time, somehow it hasn't really bothered me. The last visit I had with them, we were playing a game of codenames. John and I were on a team, and Nancy and her mother were on the team against us. Sort of a girls versus the guys scenario. We were in the last 3 rounds of the game. It was their turn, and Nancy's mother was considering a few words to fit the clue. She seemed to be hovering quite a bit. Suddenly suspicious, I casually leaned back in my chair to have a better view of everyone's feet. Sure enough, I saw Nancy's foot slide over to her mother's foot and press it. I leapt up, shouting, "Busted!" Nancy burst out laughing, and the table was in an uproar, everyone shouting, laughing, and accusing. When everyone had settled down, we got back to the game. I was the clue giver, and gave my partner his clue followed by the number 2. He guessed correctly, once, and then twice. We had only 1 word left to go. Anyone who has played Codenames will realize how easy it can be to get your team to pick 1 word out with 1 clue. The girls needed to get 4 words. Anyone observing would realize that Nancy and her mother needed to get all 4 words on this turn or they would lose. Knowing the words and the amount of them needed, I knew it would be impossible for them to win this particular game, even with the helpful tapping of the foot. As I considered this, a sly smile crept across my face. I leaned back again as Nancy gave her mother what would most certainly be her last clue. My team's last word was whip. I saw it sitting there on the table, looking up at me. Nancy's mother passed her hand over the cards, turning some slightly askew to mark them as possible candidates in this, their last chance. As her hand passed over the word whip, I ever so quietly slid my foot under the table and tapped her mother's foot. After a brief pause, she passed her hand over again, now saying something like, "It could be whip." Again, I slid my foot over and pressed the bottom of my foot gently down onto hers, my foot reassuring hers and letting her know that it was in fact the correct word. After it had imparted its little lie, I withdrew my foot, crossed my arms, and could almost mouth the words along with her mother. "I choose the word whip." With that, we won the game smartly, not even needing our last turn. Laughing, I revealed my treachery, citing that they could not have won anyway, and that it had not been for their earlier deceit, my ploy would not have worked. I don't think they thought it was as funny as I did. A lot of tales of horror and treachery end with, "I never played that game again." But this game and others I look forward to with them, hopefully for many years. But through those years, I'll always keep one of my eyes under the table. Okay. Bye.
I don't understand why he doesn't get mad at her for cheating.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess because he could pull something like this.
Well, this is the deal. So this is the big debate, and I'm sure this will show up in the forums. Is it okay to cheat to stop a cheater?
We have to sink to her level.
Because that's what happened here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay?
In this case, I'm saying yes. I will allow it.
Well, I know the next time me and Eric are playing Codenames, my feet will be all over the place. And then Eric will look at me and cock an eyebrow, and I'll be like, "Oh, sorry, I thought we were cheating."
Stop playing footsie with Z.
Sorry. It's such Okay, I'm not condoning this, folks. Please do not say I'm condoning this. I think it's a horrible thing. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Let's get to some other stuff.
And now it's time for bonus action. Musings, stories, gripes, and theories with Mike Rudman.
We hear it every week.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. But how much do you really know about the people you play games with? When I was looking to start a game group several years ago after the Navy moved us to Maryland, Mark was one of the first gamers I met. I found him through Board Game Geek's Find Users feature. He lived only about 10 minutes from our new house. He and I had similar tastes, and we hit it off pretty much immediately. Although he was a bit more of a Euro gamer than I was initially, we were both willing to play pretty much anything, and over the course of the next couple of years, our Sunday night group grew, and it flourished. Well, maybe 2 years after Mark and I started gaming together, I was heading to bed after another successful Sunday game night. I was talking to my wife, and somehow we started sort of talking about the other guys in the group. She pretty much only knew them as my gaming buddies. So she asked me, "What does Mark do again? You know much about his family?" I'm not sure, really. Something with accounting, I think? He has a wife and some kids. They seem cool. She stared at me. "You've been hanging out with these guys every week for a couple of years, and you don't even know them, do you?" "Sure I do. We play games together." "Well, do you talk?" "Of course we talk." "We talk about games." "I don't know, isn't that how most gaming groups work? You just play games together, you laugh and you trash talk, eat some snacks, and then you pack up and go home." In June of 2014, Mark and I made the car trip to our first Origins game fair. The drive from suburban D.C. to Columbus is a little under 6 hours, and we started the trip at about 4 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, games piled high in the back seat and in the trunk. Side note for Dice Tower historians, this is the same trip to Origins that spawned a particularly traumatic tale of horror recounted in episode 401, involving a certain Dice Tower co-host and a dejected convention goer. But I digress. Check it out if you're interested. As we set out on the long, early morning drive to Columbus, of course we had some podcasts with us to listen to in the car, and some music, and we were talking about which games we were most excited to play. But eventually, and probably for the first time, Mark and I really started talking. We talked about our families. We talked about our experiences growing up. We talked about our faith backgrounds, which in some ways were very similar, in other ways dramatically different. We talked about the people, things, and ideas that were important to us. I started to understand him more and appreciate him as more than just a gaming buddy, but as a friend. We stopped about halfway there at a roadside restaurant for a nice big breakfast, and the conversation just kept getting better. I think for the latter part of the trip, we barely talked about games at all. I'll never forget that car ride. Now, I realize that this might not seem like a big deal or some huge revelation. Congratulations, you know how to talk to a human being about something other than board games. But that trip meant a lot to me, and it made me realize just how little I really knew about people that I spent so much of my time with. The thing is, this hobby can be so much more meaningful, so much richer, when you make the effort to get to know your gaming friends beyond the dice and the cards. I've been stationed in Italy for the past 2 years, but I've gone back to D.C. on a couple of occasions for work, and both times I've met up with Mark and his family. For games, of course, but I've also shared meals at their table, gotten to know his 3 children and watched them grow up, and become close with his wife Megan as well, who, it should be noted, is quite the formidable board game opponent herself. And I think the time we spend gaming together is better for it. So the next time you get together with your game group, take the first step, even if it's uncomfortable at first. Take the initiative to reach out to someone and plan a non-gaming activity. Get your families together and take a break from the routine. I bet you it will be worth it, because ultimately, our hobby is, first and foremost, about people.
Welcome to Cult of the Old, where I discuss games we may have forgotten about, or games that failed miserably, but still had some good mechanics in it.
He's Brian Counter, and everything he does is counterproductive.
This week, I wanted to talk about Nicht de Bohne, created in 1999 by Horst Rainer Resner, rated rank 6.4 and 2100 on Boardgame Geek. Translates to not the bean, but this has nothing to do with Bonanza, and I'm not sure the German fixation with beans are. This is a very simple card game. 4 different colored suits of beans, 1 through 10, but then there's a 2 times card and 3 negative cards. Winner is the one with the most points at the end of the game, and that's it. I think an alternative title could be, here, you take this, I don't want this. The lead player puts a card face up for everyone to see, then the other players all put a card face down, and then they reveal at the same time what those cards are. Then the lead player takes a card out on the table that wasn't the one they laid out, and puts it in their tableau. Then the player who got that card taken takes another card and so on and so on. And the last card to be taken is going to be the lead player's card. If you really want that lead player's card, you're going to have to put out stuff that no one else is going to want, and vice versa. If you don't want it because it's going to mess you over, then you have to put out stuff attractive enough to other players to where they'll take it first, or second, but at least not last. The simple math tells you if you get a 2x multiplier, then collect a lot of high cards in that color, or at least a lot of them, so you're going to seek those kinds of cards. But what makes it fun are the negative ones. If you've done a lot of work to get a 2x in front of a certain color, and then someone sticks you with a negative card, well, that's going to be obviously negative points. But if you can get the second negative, it evens it out, but that third negative could bite you back. And so it's silly fun in that way. Each suit has 3 negative cards. What makes this game really fun is the double think that goes on, trying to figure out what others are thinking, not wanting those negative cards unless you really need one, and the amount of metagaming that goes on at the table. Oh, look, Aaron's winning. Again. So we have to stop him or make sure he gets that negative to mess him over and those kinds of things. It's just silly, stupid fun. It's also an atypical way of taking cards at the table, and I just think it's fun. And then the game's out of print, but you can find a couple reasonably priced copies on the Geek, and you can make your own cards if you really needed to. So if this sounds fun, consider picking up Nicht de Bohne.
Mr.
Vassal, yes. Do you have any superpowers?
Are you really working on Nothing Personal, Junior?
What are your top 10 candy bars?
And now the Dice Tower will authoritatively, definitely, possibly, maybe answer your questions.
Tom, which way to the bathroom?
Nicholas says he's in a game group of about a dozen people. And they split into groups and each choose games. And there's this guy who has exactly the same taste as Nicholas. Meteor and strategic. And therefore he always ends up in the same group as Nicholas and always wins. Now I can take a loss, but losing all the time frustrates me. Real aversion has built up during the last few months, even though he's a nice guy. He wins and smiles, I grudge. I now have the choice between playing games of my taste, knowing he'll beat me again, or ditching the group and joining the group that plays games I don't really care for. I'm sorry. I know that's not a funny question. But it's funny.
Yeah, and a little sad.
Nicholas, this is a you thing. I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah.
If he beats you all the time, so be it.
It's tricky. I mean, you just have to suck it up, I think, if you're, enjoying your types of games. But I can see how we've had a couple of ringers in and out of our group. Just some people who always get it and manage to decode and decrypt the systems faster than other people at the table when learning new games. And they just end up winning more often than not. It's not an always sort of thing, but you always feel better, say defeating Chris in a game. You always feel better beating Chris, or like Jason. If you win against Jason in a game, that feels like an accomplishment for many types of games.
Right.
So treat it like a super hard mode in the games that you're playing. If you can beat whoever this guy is, Nicholas, I mean, that's a goal right there.
I beat Jason today in a game, but it was a very bad game, so I take no joy in that victory. But still, we played. Did I beat him in the smell game? No, we tied. And then we couldn't figure out from the rules who won in a tie. But I tied him, which is like a victory. Yeah, listen, this happens to me all the time with Jason. And there are some times I'm like, you know what? I don't want to play with you next game. So then I go play the other game. I don't know what to tell you. If you hate all the other games the other people are playing, I don't know what to say. Winning is not everything.
There you go. Laura has friends with 3 kids in grades K through 7, and they are adopting an 8-year-old from China that doesn't speak English. This family loves board games, so I was thinking it would be fun to get some they could play as a new family. But I'm having a hard time coming up with games that would engage kids that are a little older, but also not require much explanation for their new daughter. Some of the dexterity games from Haba were the only ones that came to mind. Any ideas for me? I actually have some expert advice on this one. My friend Joe, who runs our game group, a year and a half ago adopted a 7-year-old from China, and he, being a board gamer, has introduced a whole bunch of games to his son. And so I texted him and said, hey, what has worked with your son? So they started with a lot of abstracts and dexterity games. So Pitch Car was excellent for, language universality. early games were Connect 4, Skip Bow, and Pitch Car. But now, having been here for a year and a half, favorites are King of Tokyo, Pandemic the Cure, Samarkand, Connect 4, and Animal Upon Animal. They have to explain some of the cards for King of Tokyo and Pandemic the Cure, but those have been the big hits. I know they've also played The Three Little Pigs. I lent them my copy of that one, and that one was hitting the table quite a bit. This is the Tales and Games series, Three Little Pigs. So that's the best advice I've got. Not, you're talking about 1 year older, but probably around that same age range, those could very well work.
Well, I don't really have anything better to say to that because Eric had a super specific example there. I will say this, though. She will learn English extremely fast. So this is not, I think, a long-term problem. Sam says, here, I'm about to rant. I'm going to rant. Given the growing trend of legacy games hitting the market lately, how long do you anticipate it will take before there are enough legacy games to realistically formulate a top 10 legacy games list? I'm going to answer this question before I answer his much better question.
Okay, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
There is not a trend of legacy games. Why do people keep asking this question? Eric, how many legacy games came out in 2016?
1.
Right. How many came out in 2015?
1 or 0?
1. Pandemic Legacy.
Right.
And this year, Seafall.
Yes.
And there might be another one coming out later in 2016. That does not make a trend. That doesn't even come close to making a trend. They haven't even announced that many legacy games. I think there might be 2 or 3 that have been announced. Don't worry about it. It's not a trend. They're really hard to design. Really, really hard.
Yeah, they take a long time.
So it's not going to happen. So how long do I anticipate before we can make a top 10 legacy game list? 2020. No, that's way too early. I'm sorry. 2030. I might do it earlier than if suddenly they take off, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have at least 10. You probably want 15 or so out there so you can at least exclude some from the list. Because right now you'd have to put, we didn't playtest this at all, legacies on the list.
No, I don't have to put that on the list. It doesn't deserve to be at a top 10 list. I can tell you right now, number 1, Pandemic Legacy. Number 2, Risk Legacy. Number 3, Seafall. There is nothing else to talk about. All right. Sorry. Rant over. Now, when was the last time you actually played Settlers of Catan? He says he and his friends get so wrapped up in the excitement of trying new and different games, they often don't play Catan as much and opt to play heavy games. Given your background as reviewers, do you tend to play Settlers of Catan by the wayside in order to entertain newer, heavier games, while still respecting the renown of Catan?
Renown.
Respect the renown, Eric.
Respect the renown. I think the last time I played straight up Settlers was probably a year and no, it was my sister's wedding. So that would be like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So yeah, it's been a while. I need to bring out Settlers with the kids because they could certainly handle that game. And try. We did Catan Jr., but I think at least the older child, I think, has aged out of Catan Jr.
Well, I'll say this, Eric. If you do play Catan with your kids, I would definitely recommend playing with the setup that it shows in the book. Like, don't let them pick their starting 2 settlements.
Oh, no. Yeah, basic setup.
I don't know the last time I played Catan. It might have been last year sometime, but I played it with an expansion, and I probably wouldn't play without at least an expansion, whether that expansion's Fishermen or Seafarers or some version. I like Catan. Catan's fine, but I always want to play with one of the expansions. There's a whole pile of them out there.
Jeff is just curious if we feel the need to complete the scenario games that we like. Jeff loves Imperial Assault and was buying everything for it until now, but with the announcement of the latest expansion, I realized I've only played through 2 of the campaigns. How can I justify buying more when I haven't finished what's still there? Do you hold off on buying a new expansion if you haven't played through all the scenarios in the base game? The Wolf expansion for Zombicide Black Plague looks awesome, but I've only played through half of the original. Do you worry about these things, or am I crazy? When I was a kid, I'd get a game like Hero Quest, and we'd play through the whole thing before even considering playing another game. Now it's tough to complete any sort of campaign, as most games get 3 or 4 plays at best. I'm even hesitant to buy other scenario-based games like Mansions of Madness because I feel guilty that I haven't completed the others on my shelf. But they all look so good.
All right, well, first of all, you don't need to have everything. You really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't worry so much about playing through all the scenarios in these games. I usually like getting the extra stuff because it introduces more monsters that you can use in your scenario right now. So, like, for example, Imperial Assault, you can buy this, and, I got some new Imperial Stormtroopers, and I can use those in the campaign right now. You always can. There's always, they Fantasy Flight makes these things work modular. Like, for example, I've been playing a lot of Eldritch Horror lately, and when I open up a new expansion, I don't have to play everything in that expansion. I can just add bits and pieces, and they all fit in my current, games that I'm playing. And Fantasy Flight's pretty good about doing that, so I wouldn't worry about that. Like, for example, the Wolf expansion you mentioned for Black Peg looks awesome. You've only played through half of the original. I think you might be able to add the wolves into the scenario you're doing right now. I don't know about that one, but I do know about the Fantasy Flight games, and you definitely can do that.
Yeah. With something like Mice and Mystics, though, I would be hesitant to, because it's story-based, because it's linear, I'd be hesitant to add in a new expansion if you haven't completed the storyline from the one you have.
That one's different, though. That one very specifically has the new monsters can't show up in the first campaign.
Right.
But the Fantasy Flight ones are more modular.
I mean, you can certainly tweak it and get the new stuff in there, but it's not really designed that way.
You're just justifying it at that point.
Right.
I don't recommend that. Josh says, I'm curious to find out how many people who come by the Dice Tower booth at a convention have no idea what you guys do. Do you have a prepared explanation for them, or is it off the cuff? Would you rather chat with a Dice Tower fan or talk with someone who might become a new listener?
Well,
that's a great question, Eric.
No, that's a good question, and it's
I mean that.
It happens because occasionally there's certainly a ton of people at something like Gen Con and walking by, and I've had a couple people who are very embarrassed by the whole thing. They come by and go, "I have to say I have no idea what you guys do," and it's a little. It sort of makes us change gears because we're used to people coming up and going, "Oh yeah, I know you from the videos, or I know you from listening to the podcast," and that's just most people who come to our booth and start talking to us will fall into one of those or both of those categories. And to have somebody who just comes up because they saw a playmat that we're selling, or the dice towers, or just is looking around and wondering what these people are doing in this particular booth. We have to switch gears and then back up a little bit. So we do board game reviews. Dicetower.com, head over there and check it out. And sometimes you'll get a light and go, "Oh yeah, I think I do know what you guys do," and they just haven't followed us as a brand. And then other people nod politely and wander off. That just happens. As far as a rehearsed patter, I don't think we have that. But I guess we all end up saying about the same thing. Do you like board games? We review them, more or less.
Yeah, I actually like when people come up and talk. I mean, you say, who would I rather talk to? I guess I'd rather talk to a Dice Tower listener. But I mean, it doesnn't matter to me. I like talking to everybody. So it doesn't happen as much as you might think, though, nowadays. Because a lot of people who don't know who we are just walk by.
Right. It's a handful of people that actually do engage us and don't know what we do and are actually, what is this about?
The ones that always throw me off, though, are the guys who are being dragged by somebody else. And they're taking the picture. Like, "Oh, honey, can you take this picture?" And the guy's like, I don't know who you are.
I don't know
my girlfriend
who you
wants
are.
a picture
Sure.
with you. Like, I swear I never met her before. Or this guy's like, "Yeah, my friend made me come over here. He says you're a big deal." I'm like, "Well, we're really not. Your friend's lying to you." We always have to be careful, okay? I always want to keep my head straight on this thing. We are not super famous. We do not have aspirations to be super famous. I always assume every single person I meet doesn't know who I am unless, I already know who they are to some degree. Mm-hmm. It's starting to happen every once in a while. I got stopped at Universal Studios by somebody.
Nice.
And I got stopped at the Miami Zoo by somebody, which was really funny because the guy came up to us and said, Are you Tom Vassell? And I was like, yeah. He's like, do you do board game reviews? I'm like, yeah. Do you watch them? He's like, no. he's like, I don't really like board games that much. I play Monopoly every once in a while. And I was like, okay. Would you like to go to our board game meetup sometime? And he's like, maybe I will come. And that was that. I was like, well,
nice.
All right.
Did we talk about the guys at the at breakfast? I don't know if we talked about that in our episode.
Oh, that was hilarious.
So we Tom and I go out to breakfast. This is in Connecticut. And
it's an amazing place, Cosmic Omelet. Oh.
Sam and Z, yes, it was called Cosmic Omelet. And Sam and Z were sleeping in, so it's just the two of us. And we went to this place and sit down next to a couple of guys who are chatting about stuff and, just locals. And we order our food and we're just chatting. And as these two guys get up, they say, have a good time at the portal. And Tom and I just look at each other like, wait, you guys know who we are? What? You didn't say hi or anything. What? We didn't want to disturb
really funny.
you.
They were talking
very weird.
Sports the whole time, and I thought, oh, okay, just some sports guys, And it was just really funny. We would have said hi earlier, but we didn't know.
Sure. We were just trying to, leave you to your conversation. It was just weird. You sort of get into that mode. You don't expect to be recognized at the local breakfast place, and apparently like 2 or 3 other people were there too, and saw us across the room and just didn't stop and say hi. It was.
Well, I can see why, Eric, because that place is amazing.
It was amazing.
First of all, the name, Cosmic Omelet, good name.
Good stuff.
Secondly, they really made good omelets there, guys. If
they
you're ever
did.
in that area.
Yeah.
Wow. And they weren't huge. I was worried that they'd bring us some omelet that, that's worthy of a vassal, but it was a summer omelet, which is much better sized.
Sure. Far more reasonable.
All right, I have one last question. I'm shooting here to the bottom, Eric, because we want to save some time for Pandemic Legacy. And Ben says he's been an avid board gamer for about 6 years now. He says, when I began in this hobby, I quickly realized a few things about the board gaming culture I'm still curious about. Number one, what's the fascination with singing? I understand that there are folks who enjoy musicals and Disney movies, but I was surprised about finding this to be an interest among board gamers. As I grew up, the interactions I had with LAN gamers, D&Ders, and other sci-fi types have not shown this fascination. And as a 44-year-old, when I was growing up, we outgrew the Disney movie thing by the time we got into middle school.
Oh.
So this leaves me wondering, what is it about this activity that the board gaming community is so fascinated with? If, for example, Star Wars had been a musical, I would understand it. However, and I'm gonna respond to this seriously. I have a whole lot of snarky responses I could make, but I think there's several reasons for this. One, I'm gonna say, maybe I'm trying to have a nicer way to say it. But you said that you had interaction with these land D&Ders and sci-fi types, and they didn't show this fascination with music. I think that's a rarity. I found that most people I meet in life like music. They really do. Mm-hmm. And anytime I played games with people, if I burst out in a song or something, which happens in lots of games, someone will say something, a line of a song, and someone will sing part of it, that happens all over the place, and people do it all the time.
Yeah.
However, if you're speaking specifically to Disney movies and musicals, I will remind you that most board gamers that I have met are married middle-aged people who have children who listen to these things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you have all these songs memorized.
Yes.
The snow comes up in the wintertime. In summer. If you say Let It Go, in my head, I honestly cannot not think of that song. Mm-hmm. It's impossible for me. Really, people have to come up with a different phrase. Because we could be having like the most serious dead conversation where someone will be like, Tom, let it go. And I'll be like, let it go. I can't help myself. So I really think that family aspect is a big deal of it. Because you can tell your kids, that's a stupid movie, I hate that song, and you'll find yourself whistling it later on.
Right. I mean, I don't know if I can really generalize here. I just love musical theater in general and movie musicals and Disney stuff. And I've always grown up enjoying it and I appreciate it. And, I perform that sort of thing and have a background there. I think maybe because board gaming is something that we constantly try and drag out of the realm of kid stuff. The general public often thinks of board games as being stuff for kids. We have given ourselves permission to enjoy that sort of thing as an adult pursuit as well. And so maybe some of that follows, that some of these things that are a little more imaginary and frivolous and sometimes a little silly, we've all given ourselves permission to enjoy that too. Who cares what age group you think it belongs to? I'm not sure. I mean, I just like that stuff. I don't like his next example.
Cthulhu?
Yes.
He says he doesn't understand Cthulhu either. This is something that other sci-fi friends of mine have had a passing interest in. So this is at least more understandable to me than a singing thing. Cthulhu also something I've heard much about in mainstream culture nor among my D&D group over the previous decade. And I think that is actually more of a symbol of time, because Cthulhu has become big in the last decade as opposed to the prior decade. And while I would say Cthulhu is probably not in mainstream, although I would argue that Cthulhu certainly seemed present in the very popular movie The Cabin in the Woods. Cthulhu in nerd culture? Are you kidding me? Go to any comic book convention, and you will find Cthulhu artwork there in some form or fashion. This has nothing to do with board gamers. And D&D, half the monsters in it seem like they're inspired by Cthulhu.
Yeah.
I think this is more of a timing issue, because Cthulhu, I'm not the biggest Cthulhu fan in the world. It is what it is. But I can see why people like it. It's so prevalent in nerd culture or geek culture. It may not be in mainstream culture, but all it's going to take is one big Cthulhu movie. And that's it.
I'm actually surprised with all of the zombie movies and TV shows and stuff that we haven't seen a solid, mythos-based film. I wonder why that hasn't happened.
I think it's easier to put makeup on a person.
It is easier
than it is to make
a
big, giant, great
tentacled monster.
Tentacle monster.
and it's probably, the mythos requires a little bit more backstory too. You'd really need to really embrace that. You'd have to do a lot of explaining to the audience what's going on.
Yeah, well, I believe there is a big budget one in the works, I think.
Is there?
That is what I heard.
Okay.
All right, well, that's our last regular question. Let's get to the question of the week.
It's time for the Dice Tower's Question of the Week, sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., in which our team of gaming experts answers one of your questions, thus increasing the odds that someone will get it right. This week's question: what sort of D6s do you prefer?
This is Professor Scott Rogers of A Biography of a Board Game. What kind of dice do I like? Well, let me tell you, I am really picky when it comes to dice. I hate those little tiny dice. I don't like metal ones. I don't like the really big ones or foam ones. I just like 16 millimeter plastic dice with pips and square corners. Now, I know the rounded ones roll better, but you know what? I like what I like.
It's Roy Candy from Epic Gaming Night, and I really just love the plastic standard D6s with pips on them. They're the perfect weight for playing games, not too heavy, not too light, and it just feels right playing with some regular old D6s. If I'm going to talk about a color, I really love like the Borealis series from Chessex. It looks like there's an aurora inside each dice, and it goes really great with space-themed games.
Hey, this is Paul Owen of Dice Tower News. I'm pretty easy to please. I just want two things out of dice. I want dice that feel substantial in my hand and dice that I can read. Oh, and I don't like round corners. I actually had a rounded die that landed on its corner on a tablecloth in a Catan quarterfinal at PresCon. Okay, immediately that was pretty cool. Nevertheless, I just want square, heavy, easy to read dice. Oh, and they have to fit through a dice tower, not like those giant Seasons dice, for crying out loud. But I don't like tiny dice either, so square, heavy, easy to read, normal-sized dice. Is that too much to ask?
Hello, this is Untitled Chapter, Portal Games.
And Stephen Bonicore, Stronghold Games. We are Board Games Insider.
And my favorite dice is because of the sentiment for the Warhammer Battle. So these are the small plastic dice that were used by Games Workshop for years, and I love them. I played so many times.
I like to go with, I do like plastic dice, and the cooler the symbols you can have on them, the better. And, I would go with numbers versus pips if I had to make those distinctions too, and rounded corners, get that good roll on them.
This is Brian from Cult of the Old. Not a fan of metal dice, hate wooden dice. I like plastic, rounded corner dice of bigger size for visual reasons, but I love custom dice when available, like Tiny Epic Galaxies and Bang the Dice Game. There's a little bit of a visual image there that tells you a story on what's supposed to happen with that die, and I just like that.
Hey everybody, it's the Board Game Point of View. And our favorite six-sided dice? Well, I think we've got different opinions here. I actually prefer smaller dice, and I'm not quite sure why. I think it might be because you can just fit more in your hand and just roll them all and see what happens.
You mentioned small dice, and I also have a pair of extremely tiny six-sided dice. They're approximately half a centimeter, and I carry them around in my D&D set just for fun. So, tiny dice.
Tiny dice. I guess we're in agreement.
This is Graham from Four Corners of the Board. My favorite dice are my least practical dice. Metal dice with slightly rounded corners, usually with interesting designs on each side, and preferably large enough so you can enjoy the design of the dice. And when there are designs on the sides, I do like to have numbers instead of pips. It just makes it easier to read. I have quite a few of these, many from Kickstarter, but since they're large and people frown on rolling them on most tables, they are the perfect dice to use in a dice tower.
Hi everyone, this is Glenn from The Sweet Spot, and the best dice are the ones that are really tactile and really feel it in your hand, and you really feel like you're interacting with something great. So I would probably have to go with the wooden dice from Jamaica. The larger, you feel the ridges of the wood. It has pips. I do like the numbers from like the King of Tokyo dice, but it feels so good in the hand. So big wooden dice, that's my choice.
Hi, this is Flip from Flip the Table. One of my favorites is the football-shaped die from Battle Ball. I've bought a dozen copies of that game just for that die. But ever since I learned about the careful precision that Vegas dice are made, how the matter from a 1 and a 6 are always equal to keep equal weight, so there's just something beautiful about that. And in a classic D6 with pips, it's just really cool.
Everybody's got their own suggestion, which is...
Isn't it interesting how different everybody was?
Yeah. Like, I love that, there's some people who are like, I hate wooden dice, and then other people are going, I love these wooden dice. These wooden dice are great. It's, for me, I think I just go with the straight-up 16mm Chessex style dice. Color-wise, purples and blues, often swirled together, are a favorite. I want pips on my dice. The numbers are fine. The numerals are okay, but I want the classic pips. And custom symbols only if there's still a number involved in them. I hate rolling a custom die, and then the custom symbol comes up, and I'm like, wait, is that the 1 or the 6? And I got to pick up the die, and okay, that's the 1 this time. At least Tom did it right. In our Dice Tower custom dice, inside the tower is either a 1 or a 6. So you at least know what's going on. But it bothers me when we get custom stuff that I don't know what that means now. It just ends up being a display die at that point.
Well, you might imagine I have some thoughts on this.
I can't wait. Let me get my popcorn.
No. It's not that. I don't really care what other people like or dislike. That's no skin off my nose. I personally am torn between two different types of dice. I like the 16mm ones a lot. Right? I like the... I just like that size of a die. Wait, am I thinking 16 or 12?
I think you're thinking the 16mm are the Dice Tower dice.
Right, okay, 16mm, right.
Yeah.
So 16mm dice, and I like them with a fun side to them. I think that you should make that side the 6 if at all possible, and I like that ours has the 6 in it. Unless it's something like, then, that's the 1, right? So that's, for the most part, with my custom dice, I have a whole drawer of these different custom little dice with different pictures on them, and it's almost always on the 6.
Usually, yeah.
So, but I don't need that custom side, but I like pips way better than numbers. Way better than numbers. So, and even though I know that the sharp corners are better dice overall, and the painted pips are better than the indented, I love the way round corners roll. They do. I love when a die spins on the table and you're like, is it a 6?
Yeah.
Is it a 6? I love that feeling. And I had somebody email me about dice, and they're like, here's a good way to tell if dice are bad or not. And I said, I frankly don't really care that much. No, it can really matter. But for me, it really doesn't. It doesn't matter. If, let's say you roll the die 100 times and you find out that it rolls a certain number 20% of the time, which is not really that great for a 6-sided die, I probably would still use that die. I just don't care that much.
Not as good as 52% of the time.
I missed that one.
That's what you said the last time you said this.
We had the same conversation, haven't we?
We have.
I always forget who I'm talking to.
Goldfish. But yes, I understand what you're saying.
I'm not a huge fan of wooden dice because they feel too light to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're fine. I definitely do not like painted on the dice because those rub off, especially on wooden dice. Bad idea.
Yeah.
I love when they're indented and they're inked. That's really cool.
Too big can be a problem.
Flip mentioned the football die. I like those. But here's what else I really like. Those D12s or the double D6s or whatever they were called. The ones that are a 12-sided die and then it's 1 through 6 twice on the die. I love those because 12-sided dice roll amazing.
Sure.
And so they're not the cheapest dice in the world to get, though. But I'm slowly, if I ever see these for a cheap price anywhere, I grab a couple of them. Although, to be frank, I do that with actually a lot of different dice. I have a dice problem.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so anyhow, that's that. That's the end of our show.
The end. Sure.
Actually, we're going to talk about Pandemic Legacy in a bit. Stay tuned if you want to hear about it. If not, it's about time for you to go. We loved having you. Until next show, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
We'll see you in Essen.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode, number 478, was recorded on October 1st, 2016. Coming up next week, we're in front of a live European audience during Essenspiel 2016. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has turned your game upside down, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom and me, with assistance from Jason Thompson, Itai Perez, Eric Matthews, and Rob Searing. Coffee mugs and other ceramic objects provided by Pottery Co. Timothy Pinkham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at CoolStuffInc.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower network, including The Broken Meeple, Start Space, The Game Pit, The Long View, The Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, and Board Game University. Find out more at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. Ladies and gentlemen, the following contains spoilers for Pandemic Legacy. We will be discussing what is inside each packet inside the box for Z-Man's release from last year. If you have not played through Pandemic Legacy to its completion, or if you care, you should turn off now. The spoilers begin in 3, 2, 1.
Everyone dies? No, that's not really true. Okay, so we've had to wait this long, mostly because Eric took forever to play the game.
Well, that, and it's been about a year. This was released at Essen last year, so yeah, it's been a year since the release, and I think people who were really, really gung-ho about playing it have had the chance to work their way through it at this point.
That's true. I actually started it with my family. I bought another set of it because I was really jonesing to play it again. And I'm not actually playing it. My 3 oldest girls and my wife are playing it, so I'm just kind of facilitating it. So far they've gotten through the first month, and they won by the skin of their teeth. 3 of them have never played Pandemic before, so that was a learning experience for them too.
Oh, that's fun.
So in Pandemic Legacy, it takes the basics of Pandemic. And by the time you're done playing Pandemic Legacy, you're still pretty much playing Pandemic. It doesn't change the game that dramatically.
Until the very end.
The very final mission felt a little bit different because you're like, forget everything else.
Right.
let's just cure the disease. Now, the game takes 12 to 24 games. How many games did you play?
Let's see. I got out my notes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 games.
Yeah, that was actually the same for us. And I bet you did not have to open the box that said if you lose 4 games in a row.
I did not have to do that, no.
Did you open it anyway?
I did look at it, yeah. It wasn't nearly as epic as I thought it would be.
No, it's really not. It like gives you a few extra cards that help, and you're like, I don't know how much that would have cheered me up.
I was expecting tanks or like helicopters or something. Like, this is now the Risk guys come over and they shoot stuff up. I don't know what I was expecting. But it was more than just a couple of like unfunded events in there. Sure.
So what do you think was the biggest surprise you had over the course of the game?
Okay, so in September, you've got the hunt for it introduces the search track. I think a couple months before that, and in September you get the one where you what is it you're searching for? I should have looked up my notes here. But one of the search tracks opens up.
There's a missing soldier. You're finding this missing guy.
It's the soldier. That's who it is. And up until that, it's been, you get some sort of reward and you're sort of searching for things. And we had our the Colonel character, and we were building him up to be able to fight the faded figures. He was really, souped up and ready to do it. He was the guy that was able to go in and out and just clear stuff up. He was getting stuff done. And so we got him in position to be able to complete that search track, and even had the decision, do I clean up a couple more of the faded figures or do I go and complete this search track? I think we should do it. Let's send him in and do it, complete it, turn in the last couple of cards we need to do. And then you learn that this soldier has uncovered some sort of terrible conspiracy, and that one of your teammates is a traitor. And I forget what the criteria was for choosing who was the traitor. I think it was whoever has the what was it? It was
something to do with military. And if it wasn't military, it came down to like whoever's birthday was closest to today. There was like a tiebreaker, like different ways to do it. But it definitely was military. I think ours was the soldier. Ours might have been the colonel too. It was one of those two who died for us.
But we discovered that the colonel was the traitor. It rip him in half, destroy the colonel. So he's gone, and we've spent upgrades on him. He was our guy. And
had anyone died up to that point?
No one had died. We didn't eliminate anyone up until that point.
Yeah, the same thing happened with us because we were really chicken for most of the game. We were always, like, oh, you take a scar if you're in an area that when it outbreaks, then I will never go into a place with 3 cubes. I don't want my guy to take a scar.
Yeah.
And die. And you literally can avoid this. And I was thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe no one will die. And they're like, you must kill this guy. But that wasn't what got me with that change. What got me with that change was suddenly all those military bases we had been building were bad.
Now they're
we had
bad.
To get rid of them.
And they've been pushing you to that up to that point with let's spread these out because it makes it easier to move around. You can give other characters the ability to use the military bases. They totally, of course, on purpose, push you toward doing that and then pull the rug out from under you. Oh yeah, all that. Thanks for doing that. That was bad.
Yeah, that was my favorite moment of the game. The second biggest surprise happens, I think, in April. That's when you find out that they're zombies. Yeah, I know they're called Faded, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But they're zombies. And we kind of thought maybe that might happen because we saw that disease was mutating. So that wasn't a big surprise, but suddenly it became this... It just became a little bit personal. As you saw, like, cities falling, you're like, oh, no, we were... On our ground zero city was Essen, of all places.
Oh, was it?
What was yours?
The spread of the disease was really I mean, the visceral aspect of this, because you're trying to protect the edges of this mass that has become the faded, the coda spread, and if it jumps a border, then that really hurts. Like, oh no, now Paris is gone, and I didn't want. Oh, now 3 other cities are in danger. It really hurt to lose one of those border cities, and especially disheartening when coda is first introduced and you start putting the stickers on with the faded figures. And at first you're like, oh, it's just a nasty disease, no big deal. And then when you start putting the stickers on, only a couple came out in that first game. You're like, okay, this is fine. I think we can handle this. And then the second game after coda is introduced, or after the faded figures are introduced, and you just see it spread, because by then almost all of the cards will have come out in some way, shape, or form by the end of that game, and you just look at this whole chunk of the board that's now green.
But then my third happiness in the game was when you found you could start curing them.
Yes, but that's very end.
But that was a cool thing. And it had these little cool orange discs, and I was like, oh, we can save the world. It just felt so good at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And I really enjoyed that you were able to take these cities back. Although, did you nuke a city, Eric?
We did. Yes, Moscow. Moscow was gone.
Oh, come on now. I think we blew up. Oh, we either blew up D.C. or New York. I can't remember. It was one of the American cities. Do you feel like it was a help to have done it?
I think it must have, but because we actually removed both versions of that card. So we destroyed the Moscow card in the player deck as well as the infection deck through whatever mechanisms we used. So it was literally off the map. So it never was in danger again, but it was just this festering hole in the middle of the map. So I think it helped, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting. It lets you make these real life decisions. And I was like, I just need that card out of the deck. I'm tired of that card being drawn.
Yeah.
So, and this is why actually Richard Hamrado, he says you can play the game afterwards. And I don't think you can because one of your cities is destroyed. Maybe he didn't throw. I don't think he did the nuke though. I can't imagine him doing that option.
You could do it, but it's I guess if you just reset whatever the coded disease was back to that color cube, now you've got sort of a weird custom version of the game. But I don't know. It feels like it was designed in those last couple of months to have made it very hard to move around. You spend all this time making these cities level 3 and level 4 and level 5 so that it is very difficult to move around. And then you're told you now need to cure all of the faded cities. And you have to get to some of these using the extra mechanisms because just walking there is now very difficult to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still remember some of the surprises. The first surprise for me was when there was characters in that card deck. I don't know why that didn't even occur to me.
That they were folded, yeah.
That they were folded. I was like, what? A new character? This is pretty cool. And then once I found one, I was like, ooh, so what other new characters? I know the expansions of Pandemic. Well, these other, and most of the game honestly did come from a lot of the expansions to Pandemic.
It's true. A lot of the mechanisms were at least related to some of the expansions, yeah.
And Z was actually a little grumpy about that at first because he's like, I don't know, man. You know, this is just basically making it more complicated Pandemic. And when the zombies showed up, he said, oh, that's new. You know, and then of course, you know, it goes once you start hunting down the paths. That also now, how did you guys handle when there was a mission to go find stuff? Did you say forget everything else, let's get this done?
We did emphasize it. We didn't forget everything else, but I guess a couple of times we did near the end, as it was getting close to November. We started to say, all right, you know what? It doesn't matter what else happens. As long as we complete this, then we can still lose this particular game, but we've achieved the overarching goal. And in fact, there was at one point, I think I mentioned to you that I think it was October, we didn't want to win. We won, but we we lost the overarching goal. We didn't find the virologist or something.
Oh, you didn't find one?
Well, we did later on. We did complete everything. But in that particular moment, we lost the search track, and we wanted... I know what it was. We wanted to lose so that we had another shot at that month. But we won just through playing the game. We managed to complete all the objectives we wanted to. And it's almost like, you know what? I don't want to move into November because I didn't actually complete that search track. Now we still have to do that plot point and still worry about everything else. Whereas if we had had another shot at October, I think we probably would have completed that search track and been in better shape for November.
I have to say, as the game progressed, the characters kept changing. Like, at the beginning, it was like, medic for the win. And you make the medic, you upgrade the medic into super medic. I can't imagine anyone not doing that.
Yes, my wife played the medic almost always, and that was a very useful character.
But as time goes by, suddenly you're like, this quarantine specialist might be a pretty useful character here. That soldier seems to be like a pretty good character. And so, and then once the relationships came up, I thought that was a cool idea.
A neat idea, but I didn't think that they came into play nearly as much as I would have liked. Because
I'll tell you why they didn't, though, because you didn't switch characters. But if you switch characters, they come into play.
We did switch characters a lot, and the matchups never seemed to connect. Like, we would often plan which 3 characters are we going to use here, and it would be based on the situation in front of us and not necessarily trying to match up the relationships. And our characters that we used a lot would be already full with their 2 relationships, and so I couldn't connect them to the new character that we were going to use this game. Like the medic was already connected to 2 characters that we ended up not using nearly as much. And then a couple people were connected to the stupid colonel that got killed.
That's right. I remember Sam was like, my brother was a traitor.
It was almost a surprise when we'd get a connection. It's like, oh, we actually get to use this connection that we had made earlier on. They didn't come into play as organically as I would have liked in our game.
Now, if you were playing it again, you could really optimize it, right? I think I could beat it in 13 or 14 games.
Maybe. I mean, there's still the luck of the draw, and things could go badly for you, but
now, you
perhaps.
played this with 3 players, right?
3, my wife and son, yes.
So how did your son deal with the release of zombies and then the betrayal and death of a character?
I think he was like he was responding to the chaos. Like, oh my goodness, what's happening? This is crazy. But I think soon after that, he started to get a little detached near the end of the game. He started not caring as much about what happened. He would leave the table and say, just do my move for me. And I guess I hadn't really pinned it on that moment, but it's possible that had something to do with it. I don't think he was attached to the colonel, but maybe the fact that the characters could die, he was like, maybe I shouldn't be as attached to this as I am. It could also have been that his brother was watching cartoons in the other room and that he just happened to want to do that instead.
Yeah, that's always a thing. If you were playing it again, how many players would you play it with?
I think I'd want to add a 4th.
Yeah,
just so that we'd have more people in play at a time.
I was really happy with 4. I would love to play 4 again. I will say I think the fewer players, the easier it is to coordinate what you're doing and win, though.
Sure, because, the more time you have in between your individual turns, the less you can utilize your powers and, make stuff happen.
So Lynn asked some questions for us, so I stuck them in here. And she said, how fast do you feel is ideal to play the game? Because she said they played the whole thing in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it might have caused arguments. In May, one of the players got angry and refused to play out the game. He didn't want to talk about it or try to reconcile the disagreement. He just quit. And then he said they didn't know what to do because he had been playing as the medic. We decided to play out the game with a dummy player called Buttface. And as it is a co-op game anyway, we just decided as a team what to do with the medic. Our final issue came 3 weeks after we finished when someone actually read the quarantine specialist card and realized it was a different role from the original pandemic.
Oh, wow.
So here's the first thing I would say in that regard. First, I would say if someone had quit like that, I don't think that you had to replace him. I think you could have dropped from 4 to 3 and been fine.
Yeah.
Secondly, you said this person always played the medic. In our game, we switch the characters occasionally.
Occasionally.
You can do that.
Yeah. My wife often played the medic. I'm looking at the stats now, and she was almost always the medic. On a couple of times, she decided that she wanted to be like the virologist or something, or the immunologist. And then a couple of times, one of us grabbed the medic if she was being somebody else. But most of the game, she was the medic.
So the
and
medic
I would often be the swing guy that would grab whatever character needed to be the specialist for that game. Like if we needed somebody to go in and complete a search track, or I ended up being the ops expert a lot in order to put down military bases and then destroy them.
Yeah. So yeah, again, you don't have to play the same characters, although it's funny in our game we just played, Holly named her character Holly. And then she's like, oh, maybe I should have done that. And I'm like, man, I sure hope that one doesn't turn out.
Yeah, that's not the way it goes.
Come on now.
Talking about the time frame, we started in October of last year, and we finished in August of this year. So there was about a 4-month. I guess we had about a 2-month break from December to February, and then we had a big break from like April to July when we didn't play. So we got busy and it just lost track of time. But it took us 10 months to finish the game.
For me, optimally, if I could have any way I wanted to play it, I would probably play it every week, 2 games a week. Right?
Yeah.
Although with my family, I think I'm going to be playing once a week, 1 game. Because the kids are sitting there like, okay, what else can we do? You know, I don't want to shove this down their throats, but they are going to play it.
Right. I mean, often we would play, if often with a loss, like a really nasty loss, my wife would say, nope, we're doing it again. I don't care that it's 9 o'clock. You're staying up. We're going to play one more round. Because it was set up, you know, and you wanted to get that victory to play a second round.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, she asked how fast you feel is ideal, so I answered that. But I mean, I think you could power through it. We did. We played our game in 2 weeks, and I don't feel like that was bad. It's just that there was a lot of other things that we probably could have done instead of that. But I had so much fun. We were playing it twice a day. What do you do when one player seems to be viewing the game very differently from the others? If they were really causing problems, I'd say, if you don't want to play this, you don't have to. We will play it without you. That's, I think, would have been the better solution. Although the dummy player called Buttface is also an option.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. If that turns and it's no longer fun for one player and that makes it not fun for the rest of the players, yeah, you can go do something else. You can go watch cartoons with the kids. I don't care.
And then she said, what are you suggesting if you begin the game playing, she said the quarantine specialist, but I guess anything. If you found you played something incorrectly, we played a rule wrong the whole game. Because on the setup page, we were actually picking our roles before seeing how the board was laid out.
I made the exact same error, and I was adamant about it, talking with somebody else who was playing their own game and saying it's terrible because you have to pick your starting position and you don't know what the board looks like. So one of our research stations was in the middle of Coda Zone. Our Coda color was black, and I think we had Baghdad as a research station. And I'm like, well, it would be great to start there in order to be able to take care of things quickly, but if a bunch of faded figures show up, we all get scars on the first turn of the game. Who wants that? And he said, no, look at the numbers. If you look at I'm looking at the setup page now. It goes 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is on the other side of the page. And then 5 back to the left side of the page. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those go in some sort of order. But there's this 4 on the far right. That's the whole setup. Place infection rate marker, infect 9 cities. And that's vastly important to see before you select your funded events.
Yeah, I did the same thing because I just followed the page straight down. I wasn't following the numbers exactly. And people kept saying, you're playing it wrong. I'm like, whatever. I have the rule book. I know what I'm doing. And afterwards, I was like, oh, well, that would have made it easier. And we beat it anyway.
That was hard mode. But yeah, for about the first third of the game, I was doing the same thing and complaining, and my friend said, no, look at the rule book and follow the numbers, not just down the column. Oh. Yeah.
Speaking of hard mode, I kept expecting another epidemic card to show up.
Oh, because there's only 4 or there's 5?
There's 5, but the track has spots for 6 times the thing can move over.
Oh, right. I kept expecting another, one to show up in one of the packs.
It's like, why is that on the board?
Right.
There must be another one showing up. Oh, when's it going to show up? And it never did. I was like, oh.
It was a red herring.
Me out there. Maybe they already had the pandemic board built and they just are like, oh, leave it in there. But
maybe.
So overall, I have to say this was one of the most fun experiences of my life. So much so that I'm willing to play it again. Eric, would you play it again?
I would play it again. Yeah, I think so, because things would develop so differently. And you'd focus. There were so many things to focus on. I think we worked very hard to put the mutations out for the diseases and didn't do as much in, putting out starting research stations and character upgrades. We didn't use nearly as many of those as I thought we were going to.
Right, and you could just do things differently. Like, we barely use barricades, but we might have been able to use those to better use. And then the only thing is a few things you do differently, like would you build fewer military bases?
That is, I would probably hesitate just naturally in doing that.
Well, what Z told me, he played it again with his girlfriend. Mm-hmm. He's bought a 3rd copy, actually. He's going to play it again with someone else.
Really?
He said he just let her make all those kinds of decisions and just bit his tongue.
Right. No, that's probably a good way to do it.
Right. I don't know that I would want to play the game with a group of people who have all played the game before.
Right. I mean, part of it is that surprise that you need to have at least someone responding and reacting to what comes up rather than like, okay, here's September. We know this is coming.
Yeah, man, I'm just so happy with that, with the experience. I cannot tell you how excited I am about Pandemic Season 2. Because I just want to see where the story goes now. I don't know what it's going to have. I don't know if aliens are going to show up or sharks or
who knows.
Or maybe it's just going to be sci-fi, it doesn't have to necessarily be, anything supernatural. Even actually the game was very clear to not make the zombies supernatural. They were fated, they were a very scientific disease. Mm-hmm. There was nothing in the game that was like Cthulhu or whatever, it was all very straightforward sci-fi. I mean, they were essentially zombies, but who cares?
How much stock did you put in the score at the end of the game?
Well, we scored it wrong at first because we thought we had done something differently. I was happy with the scoring thing. I like that it was there. I didn't care. We won. And yes, we won barely in our game. Although we could have played December again, I think. But we won. And that's all I cared about. I finished the story, which is why I don't have any desire to play the finished board. We finished the story. It's done.
Yeah.
I don't feel like to keep doing more on that board. I'll play through the story again. But I felt very satisfied. It was like an epic ending. I don't know how close yours was, but ours just felt very close. Like, we got to play these cards here, and we finished it, yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I just like that.
I didn't feel like the ending was terribly difficult because we took 2 shots at December as well. I guess did you do 1 shot at December or 2?
Yeah, December. I think we beat December on our first shot.
Okay, we knew that we were probably going to have to take 2 shots at it, so we spent almost all of the first December curing all of the cities.
Okay.
And then, because we focused so hard on that, we didn't have the resources we needed to finish it up. What was the second objective? Here we go.
To go to Atlanta and play a bunch of cards and find the files.
Right. It was the search track at the end of the secret stockpile of Coda. So it's a special search track.
It was like a big search track, though. You had to put a lot of emphasis on it.
Maybe we did the search track first. No, that's what we did. So we worked really hard at finishing that search track. And we put all of our effort on that. And then that was already complete in the second game. in vaccinating every city.
I think you must have gone the other way, because I'm pretty sure when you finish your search track, you win the game.
You needed to do both. Both objectives were mandatory, but we did one and focused almost entirely on that, and then just ran out of time and resources to finish the second. But then it was complete, and the vaccinated. Once the city was vaccinated, that was like a breath of fresh air. Oh, well, that one doesn't count anymore. Okay,
right.
Those cards would come up, and you just laugh in their face. So yeah, the final game was a little anticlimactic because there was a slight panic because we thought we were coasting to victory, and then we started to count a little bit in the cards and go, oh, this actually could go really badly if we're not careful. So let's just stay focused. Don't get too excited yet. But it wasn't that difficult for the final round because we had set it up so well in early December.
All right. Well, I think that kind of solidifies that. If you guys want to talk about this in the forums, that's fine. Just ask that you put spoilers on it, on the different conversations. And also, if you don't want to find the spoilers out, don't read those threads.
Mm-hmm. Of course, if you already avoided spoilers, you're not hearing us say this.
That's true.
So
sorry. Okay. So be nice to the people who haven't seen it yet. Because some people click through subscriptions to the Dice Tower forums, and they'll open it up right away.
Right.
So anyhow, that's that. I loved it a lot. I think it's the best Legacy game currently out. It was everything I wanted it to be. I'm super excited about the next one. I rank it a 9.5, which is as close to perfect, I think, as it can be.
It is. It's a stellar game, and it achieves that narrative arc that they were trying to go for with Risk Legacy, but that was a little more open-ended and sandboxy. All sorts of stuff could happen, and it could happen in any order. This, although there's still lots of things that could happen, had an arc to it, and it felt like you were playing through, a season of a TV show. Now, my question is, what are you going to do with all the stuff in the box now? I'm thinking, now that we've had this discussion, I saved a lot of these notes. I think I'm going to dismantle it and save the cubes as extra cubes, and, the components can just sort of get put away somewhere and break down the box. I've heard people have shadow boxed the board, framed it or something, to say, here's our game. But I don't think I'm going to stick this on the shelf and keep it. I think it's going to be dismantled.
All right. Well, I guess we should end here. Wait, we already ended. This is very weird.
We've already ended. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Folks, thanks so much. I'm Tom Vassell, and you've been listening to The Dice Tower again.
I'm also Eric Sommer.